Okay, we're going to start with first flight of the day, electrical power up procedure. We'll start with the battery switch on. Of course, lift the guard, turn it on, and then close. The guard on the aircraft will close automatically, obviously. Then the standby power selector to auto. You want to check the standby power off light is extinguished. It is extinguished. Hydraulic pump electrical switches off. So these two center electrical switches are off, and these two electrical switches are off. For the 767, the demand pump selector off, and that's right here. All three of these are off, the demand and the two electrical. Gear lever down, it's down. The alternate flap selector is in norm. And then electrical power established. We're going to use the APU today, but of course, typically we'd be using the external power. So to go to on, then the start to 2 to 4 seconds. You release it, and it'll go back to on. And it says APU as required, which today it is required. Next is the origination checklist. It says if first crew flight of the day or after unobserved maintenance has been performed on the flight deck. Circuit breakers, check. We'll go up to the P11 circuit breakers and check that they're all in. And then we'll go ahead and go over to P6. And you can see some of those down here. And then while we're over here, we're going to go to the bulk cargo heat selector to either norm or vent with pets. I've been told just to leave it in vent no matter what. You might want to double check that. The flight recorder switch to norm, which you'd find down here. And I should have checked this. It would normally be in norm. Service interphone switch off. It is off. On the 767, reserve brakes and steering reset disable switch. Guard closed. And this sim does not show that. Observer's audio selector panel check. That's not shown on this one, on this simulator. Of course, it would be in the real one. Flight forms checked. They would be here, your AML. And flight deck and emergency quick equipment check. You'd look for your PBE, your crash axe, your fire extinguisher, and your life vests. The life vests would be in the back of, behind the seats. And then we do the flight deck access system check. And that's, of course, on the other side of the store. And then you'd go ahead and test that. And there's the flight deck door test also. And the status display. We go ahead and press that. Check the status. Oxygen's good. All the hydraulic quantity's good. There's no magenta RFs, which would be a refill. And then we check the parking brake is set. It is. Then we move up to the IRS selectors, or IRS mode selectors to nav. And at this point, you'd go around, you'd do your pre-flight. And typically the captain might do the FMC, or it could be used. So we'll go ahead and set that up. Say we come back in from our pre-flight, and we'll go ahead and get this started. And you want to check first your ident. It's a 767-300. That's typically not the correct engines. And you want to check the active date. And this database is out of range. Then go to your pause init, your reference airport. We're going to be going out of Dallas today, so KDFW. Take your GPS position and move it down to here. You can go ahead and just follow the 6 right prompt to route. We'll do KDFW. And we're going to Albuquerque. Flight number, we'll just use AAL 767. Then we'll go to our departure arrival. For the departure, we're going to be taking off of 18. Right, I believe. One 8 left, I'm sorry. So you'll line select 18 left. Then that'll bring up, the SIDs that are appropriate for 18 left. And today we're using the Harper 3, and it goes alphabetical. So we'll go to next page, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, one more page, H, and that's where we get our Harper 3. And then we can see the Halsey transition, and we'll go ahead and select that too, and see it's activated there. And then if you go to route, you could go ahead and type in our next waypoint of Texaco. And then you can go back to departure arrivals. That's the only one we have to type in before we get to the arrival into Albuquerque. And go here. And we're going to be landing ILS 8 with this semester transition. We're going to be doing the reckon. Well, it might not be the transition. Oh, I'm sorry. It's, ILS 8 with the Coulter 3. There it is, and the reckon. And if you go back to route, you can step through it real quickly. DFW to Albuquerque 767. Harper 3 off of 18 left to Tiger. Then the Harper 3 to Harper for the Harper 3 Halsey direct Texaco. For the Coulter 3 to reckon for the ILS 8 into Albuquerque. And there's no alternate on this one. And then you can go ahead and activate that and execute it. And then we'll finish up. And again, it prompts you on where to go, 6 right. So just 6R. And we're using the DFW to Albuquerque 767 days 2 through 4 and 6 through 9. So if you go to the back of that, you can find your zero fuel weight on the TPS. And I've got 255.2 as planned. And my reserves, we'll add the reserve and the alternate. It's 0 on this one, so it's just 5.9 for the reserves. The cruise altitude, make sure you use the actual cruise altitude, the one with the F in front of it, and that's 380 today. The cost index, 22. And then again, 6 right to follow the takeoff. And we're going to be doing a flaps 15 with the CG or the derated thrust of 61, which is standard for the forgot to get my flaps in there too. It's flaps 15 today. CG, it says it's 27.2. This will be a little bit off. Obviously, this simulator and our numbers are not exactly matched up correctly, but it'll work itself all out. And then we'll go ahead and put in our V speeds. 128 for V1, 133 for VR, and 138 for V2. And when you get done setting these speeds, you can go ahead and set up your MCP also. 138, you're going to have to dial that in. It populates it on this computer, but you're going to have to do that by hand. So you'll set in 138. And then on some of the aircraft in the simulator, you're going to have to set the bugs on the airspeed indicators right here. So to do that, you'd see V1, and of course I can't set the bugs on this simulator. It's just a PC simulator, but it'd have 128. VR, you memorize 133. 138 is your salmon bug, and that'll be set automatically by the computer. And then you want to add 20 to that, so you'd get 158, and that would be your next bug here. You'd set at 158. Then go back to index and go to your approach, and you use your VREF for flaps 30 as 136. And what most people typically do is they add 80 to that, so that would be 116, or I'm sorry, 216. And they'd set the 216 bug, which would be right about here. And then they'd set the 196 bug, and then they'd set the 176 bug. So that's 80 knots above flaps 30 VREF, 60 knots above flaps 30 VREF, and 40 knots, 80, 60, 40, above flaps 30 VREF. And then your bugs are set. And while you're at it, setting these bugs, you might as well go ahead and set your altimeter. Today in Dallas, we have an altimeter setting of 3005 with information golf. So I'll set that. And then you can go ahead and set your acceleration altitude, which is 1,410. And you just set it to 410. And then you can, the captain will probably be doing his, and he'll set 3005, and he'll also set 1410. And while you're up here, you can go ahead and set this to, we're going to be doing the Harper 3, so off of 18 left. So that's a 176 heading. Just to back it up, we will be using LNAV. Just to back that up, we'll put in 176. And it's the altitude of 10,000 is set correctly. And you want to make sure both these are in auto. He'll probably have his radio set up for a backup and then hit auto. And you'll go to auto also. won't select for some reason. Here we go. There it is. Now it's in auto. And then we can go back to our checklist. And, make sure I set up my standby altimeter to 3005 also. And of course, the captain would set up all his bugs on his airspeed indicator over here. Okay, now we return to our flow reference card. And this will be the general pre-flight, and this is prior to every flight. You start out again at the IRS mode selectors that are at nav. We did that just to get the IRSs up and running because, of course, it takes 10 minutes for them to get going. Yaw dampener switches on, and they are on. Electrical engine control switches on. Hydraulic panel set, and this is set with the 2 engine-driven pumps on and the electrical pumps and the ADP all off. The evacuation command switch guard closed. It's not shown on the simulator. HF radios as required, and it's not shown in this position. Battery standby power test and set. So you'll move this to bat, you'll get a main discharge, and you do not want to see an off light here. So that's a good test, and it goes back to auto. Electrical panel set it is. You got the APU generator in, the bus ties are in, left and right utility buses are in, and the left and right generator control switches are in. And of course the APU is on. Cockpit voice recorder test. It doesn't have the entire cockpit voice recorder. Of course there's the window right here. And when you push the test, you'll see it bump 4 times. And that's how you know you have a good test. Next it says lighting panel set, and that's of course as desired. Emergency light switch. Guard closed. That would be closed. Passenger oxygen on light extinguished. It's extinguished. The ram air turbine on lock light is extinguished. The engine control panel is set. We put this to whichever pilot is flying. Let's say the first officer is flying, so that'll be over at 2. Both of these would be on auto. On the 767, the fuel jettison panel set. It's not displayed. The fuel panel set. So all the pumps are off, and the cross-feed pumps are closed, and the C pumps are off. And we have the correct amount of fuel. Today we're requiring it's 29.3 required, so we're at 29.9, so looking good. Anti-ice panel set, everything's off. It's above 10 degrees Celsius. Wiper select panel off. Lighting panel set. Right now you would have the beacon on. Window heat switches on. So we go ahead and turn those on. HF radios as required. That'll be off. Passenger sign panel set. The no smoking sign would be on and the seatbelt sign would be off. The cabin altitude control panel set. You'd have this indexed, which would give you a standard rate of climb of 500 feet per minute, descent of 300 feet per minute. Again, we'd have that on whichever pilot was flying. 1 for the captain, 2 for the FO. You go ahead and set your landing altitude. I believe Albuquerque's 5380. That's the field elevation in Albuquerque. So I'd set that there. And if you weren't sure, of course, you could look on your JEP and There's also a way to look on your CDU by just going to index nav data and typing in KABQ, and it's 5355, so it's 5360. So I was a little off. And after that, it says equipment cooling switch off. It is off. Equipment cooling mode selector to auto. It's in auto. Lighting panel set, again, as preferred. Indicator light test, switch test. You'd press that. Sometimes you have to hold it, sometimes you can let it go. And of course, you're just looking for any bulbs that are burned out. Cargo heat switches on. It's over here on the simulator, so I'm going to go ahead and turn them on. It's a little bit out of order than it would be in the airplane. Air conditioning panel set. You want these just slightly left to center. And trim air switches on. The left and right recirc fans on. Again, this is a little bit to the left. With the APU bleed air on, we can go ahead and turn these packs to auto and get some air for the passengers. Air conditioning panel set. We just did that. Oops. Got that over on the wrong side. Hopefully we got everything on this time. Bleed air panel set. That's set. Standby compass set. And you just want to make sure there's fluid in there and that you have the deviation card. Then we move on to the forward panel. And it says VOR DME switches set. So these two VORs are set where we want them. The captain's got his set up. MCP set. We want to turn on our flight director here. Make sure the auto throttle's on. Turn on my flight director. We got V2 set. We got the heading set. 10,000 is going to be our initial our altitude on the SID. And then this disengage bar is not down, it's up. And that's it for the MCP. Standby instruments check. And you can see the standby out. Standby attitude indicator, the standby airspeed indicator, standby altimeter, all look good. Standby engine indication selector, auto. And you can see that's in auto. This would be your standby engine indication selector. So if both your ICAS screens went out, you would still be able to see N1, EGT, N2, and EPR here on the standby engine indicator engine indicator. And we'll go ahead and check these messages. We'll clear them all out. I'm going to just do a side thing here. This is, of course, a Microsoft Sim thing. I'm going to close all the doors. And just to give you guys a look at what's happening outside. Kind of interesting. That's them boarding the airplane on 18 left with the cargo, the bus, fueling it. And so now we'll go ahead and close up all the doors and get rid of all that equipment since we're fueled up and all the passengers are on board. Now that that's taken care of, we can see there's no more ICAS messages displayed. Reserve brakes and steering switch off. There's our reserve brakes and I'm sorry. Here's our reserve brakes and steering switch, and it is off. And the auto brake selector is to off. The ICAS display check, and we'd go ahead and now that we've checked all these numbers, we'd go ahead and bring up everything else and check those numbers. Everything's zeroed out pretty much except for the EGT. And that's a good number to note for the 757, but not a big deal for the 76. And what you do want to check is that we have 16 quarts of oil going, or 14 quarts of oil going out. And then when we're coming back in, it has to be at least 16. And if it's not, we should call maintenance and have them refill it. So that looks good. Status display. Check. ICAS control panel. This would be in both. Heading reference selector to norm. Alternate flaps panel set, and that's in norm. And the leading edge and trailing edge are not engaged or on. The landing gear panel is set. Of course, the gear is down, and we have 3 green. Terrain override switch is off. Ground prox flap override switch is off, and ground prox config gear override switch is off. I think that's a little bit off on these. Well, this would be the flap, and this would be the ground prox config gear override. My bad. So all 3 are there. Then you're done with that, and you want to go to the pedestal. Let's see if we can get a better angle here. And then you're just working your way from left to right. And you want to make sure your alternate stab trim levers are neutral. That's these right here. Speed brake is down. Your reverse forward thrust levers are down and closed. The flap lever is set. Should be 0 here, 0 here, and you should have seen it at 0 outside. Then we come back down here, parking brake is set. Stab trim cutout, switches, guards are closed. They're both closed. Fuel control switches cut off. They're both at cutoff. Weather radar test. There's usually a test button right here that you can push to test the weather radar. And engine fire panel set. The 2 switches are in and there's no lights, so it's set. The cargo fire panel is set. Nothing's pressed in and none of the lights are illuminated. And the APU fire panel is set. Again, the switch is in and there's no lights illuminated. TCAS transponder test. You move that to test and you hear TCAS test okay. Then it'd go back to standby. And while you're there, we know from the release that the transponder code is 1011. So I'm going to go ahead and set that now. 10111. Fire detection and overheat test. And this is only showing 1. We don't test the wheel well. There should be 2 tests right here. Here's 1. This should be our 10, 5, and 2. And that was a good test. And you'll go more into what you're supposed to see on those. It's 10, 5, and 2, and 7, 5, and 2, I believe. And then the rudder trim should be 0 here, and on your control wheel, if you look over the top of it, it should say 0 also. So aileron and rudder trim set. And we'll stop there, and we'll proceed with the next part in a second.